And we're back with Bedtime Stories, Grown-Up Edition, Short Stories, Killer Q, Part 3. Now, when we left off, Q and his crew had got the game and some ammunition from Q's Uncle Samuel. Several weeks had passed since Anya had been sent off to Trinidad to deaf school and to handle that little pregnancy issue. With a plan in place and all the artillery that they would need, Q and his crew began to put their plan into motion. One night, Q snuck out of the house, walked around the block to where his crew was waiting in the Camry that they got from Uncle Samuel, and they headed to a house in Red Hook where King had been trapped. Tuff was in place surveying the scene while the boys pulled around back. King and his boy Sly, the neighbor who'd helped him get Anya's assault on video, had been seen going inside a girl's house. Tuff told his boys, yeah, her name is Aubrey, and she invited a friend over. He looked at Q and said, you'll never guess who she is. When Tuff told Q that the second girl was Moni, Donovan's girl, Stretch asked, what you gonna do, man? Q said, no witnesses. He and Woody pulled down their ski masks, strapped up, hopped out of the Camry, and crept between the houses. When they came up on the back door, Woody put his foot to it, and Q entered, guns blazing. When they ran back out to the car, King, Sly, Aubrey, and Moni were memories. They pulled up on Tuff at the agreed upon spot, drove the car to Uncle Samuel's Flatbush warehouse, and parked it, leaving the guns and all of their other tools of the trade in the trunk, and hopped on a train back home. When Q snuck back in the house, no one was the wiser. Early the next morning, when the bodies were found, detectives interviewed everybody remaining in King's crew and the families of the victims. It didn't take long for a connection to be made between King, Moni, and the St. James family. As was customary in New York City in the early 90s, the streets weren't talking. Neither was Q or his crew. Thankfully, Donovan was none the wiser, so his grief was authentic and on full stage. He was heartbroken to discover that Moni was not only dead, but unfaithful. And the Queen Mother was adamant when Detective Erickson came to their home to question her sons that they'd had nothing to do with the murders. She said, can't you see that my son is grieving right now? Clearly, neither Donovan or Quincy had anything to do with this. Neither of them are in the streets. My boys are straight A students, not associated with any of these gangs running around New York City, and neither of them would ever harm a hair on a woman's head. Detective Erickson said, right, but what about their friends? The Queen Mother said, they don't hang around those kind of friends. And even if they did, they were both in this house. They worked with us all day yesterday at the business, came home with us, went to their respective workouts, and were home before curfew. Detective Erickson asked, well, are they available to come down for additional questions? The Queen Mother said, absolutely not. You want to talk to my boys? Get a warrant, and we'll see you with a lawyer. It didn't take long for both Donovan and Q to recognize the police details assigned to follow their every move. But Q was prepared. That night, he snuck out of his parents' brownstone using the basement door that connected his brownstone to his Uncle Artemis's brownstone. Once inside his Uncle Artemis's basement, he laid low until he was sure that the coast was clear. Sneaking out his Uncle Art's basement, he made his way to the train station and took the train over to his Uncle Samuel's warehouse in Flatbush, where he picked up the Camry. Expecting NYPD to be on each of them, every member of Q's team was in position at alternative locations. Officers followed Tuff to his aunt's house in Jamaica, Queens, where she excitedly and loudly welcomed him to her home and thanked him fervently for agreeing to keep an eye on his grandmother over the weekend while she went out of town. So Q picked him up from the neighborhood adjacent to his aunt's block, and then he headed to scoop Woody. Woody had led officers to his girlfriend's house, and then he snuck out the back and hid in the alley behind the laundromat. With Woody in tow, they headed to pick up Stretch. He was sitting in front of the library, still dressed in his gym clothes. Q said, come on, man. Please tell me you haven't been here since 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Stretch said, of course not, man. I ran here, though, from the gym, And then I went over to my girls, hung out with her, had dinner, and when her parents went to sleep, I came back over here. Don't worry, my alibi is tight. When they ask, I've been at the gym, the library, and Marcy's. Confident that their alibis were on lock, the crew headed for the trap that they had set up for the remainder of King's team. Earlier that day, Woody had a girl make a phone call to Drew. The girl said, I heard you trying to figure out who killed your man King. When Drew said he was, the girl said it was Killer Q. And if you want to find him, you'll be at King Park tonight at 11:30, because that's where him and his crew be at. When Drew said, how do I know this isn't a setup? The girl said, if it was a setup, you would have already been got when you was leaving out of Green Acres Mall earlier today. If it was a setup, you'd have been got when you and your sister was leaving out of Dwayne Reed yesterday. I'm helping you out. If you want to get back, be at King Park. When Drew asked why the girl was trying to help him, she said, because Moni was one of my best friends. And I don't want anything to happen to you, your sister, or your mother. So as Q slowly drove around King Park, him and his boys were on their JOBs. Woody spotted Drew posted up by the swings. Tuff spotted 2 remaining members of the crew hiding in various spots in the park. And Stretch spotted their getaway driver. As Q slowly pulled up next to their getaway car, Tuff rolled down the back passenger side window and let off 2 shots from a silenced 9mm firearm into the head of the driver. With the headlights off, Q pulled up on the right side of the park, pulled over, and hopped out. Stretch simultaneously hopped out of the back driver's side and into the front driver's seat. Dressed in all black, Q snuck through the park and up on one of the hidden men. He took his silenced 9mm firearm and put 2 in his head. Then he crept around to the position of the second man, removed the silencer from the gun, and let off 3 shots. This served 2 purposes. 1, those 3 shots hit the mark, but they also let Drew know that he was there. So when Drew heard the shots, he took off running for the getaway car. Unfortunately, when he got there, he found out that the driver was dead. Q picked up his spent shell casings and made his way to the Camry. As expected, Drew took off running home, and Q and the team let him. The following day, Detective Erickson was pissed. The streets weren't talking, and neither was Drew. Police couldn't prove that Q, Tuff, Stretch, or Woody had left any of the locations where they had been tailed. So on the 3rd night, everything was a go. Woody was responsible for getting the Camry, and he was on pickup duty. Tuff was in position at his aunt's, and Stretch was spending the night at Q's. That night, Q and Stretch snuck down to the basement, and just as they got to the basement door that connected the brownstone to Uncle Art's, the overhead light came on, and standing by the light switch was the Queen Mother. She said, and where exactly do you 2 think you're going? Q said, Ma, I can explain. It's not what you think. I was just going to ask AJ a question. AJ is Q's cousin, Uncle Artemis's son. The Queen Mother said, at 1 o'clock in the morning, dressed in all black, in the dark, through the basement. Boy, don't play with me. Get your behind upstairs now. When Q and Stretch got to the 1st floor, Pops Andy was waiting for them, in the dark, in the living room. He said, I don't know what you boys are up to, but you're going to cut it out, and you're going to cut it out now. This is not your fight. Vengeance is the Lord's. If you're not careful, one or all of you are going to wind up dead or in jail. Make this the last time you sneak out of this house. When Q and Stretch missed the rendezvous, Woody dropped Tuff off in the vehicle, and they intended to reconvene the following day as planned. They had an agreement. If anyone didn't make the rendezvous, they would cancel the plan and pick up the next day as usual. So on the 4th night, it was Tuff's turn to pick up the Camry. When he picked up Stretch at the rendezvous point and Stretch told him what happened the night before, he decided that it was time to put an end to the entire thing. When Stretch told him that Drew had been at home all day long, that he hadn't left, and that it was most likely that he thought staying home would keep him safe, because of the overwhelming police presence in the neighborhood and the unlikelihood that Killer Q and his crew would attack him on his home turf. Tuff made an executive decision. He decided not to pick up Woody and Q from their rendezvous points. Instead, he'd handle it himself. When Tuff had Stretch drive him to Q's neighborhood, he went down the opposite street. He hopped out of the car, slid down the alley behind Drew's house, and took out a flashbang that he threw through the first floor window of Drew's house. The Queen Mother, who hadn't taken her husband's advice and gone to sleep, heard the bang in her bedroom. She jumped up and ran into her son's room and found him in the bed. She ran to the front window, and just as she did, she saw Tuff. When the occupants came out running and screaming, Tuff picked them off one by one. He hit Drew, Drea, and their mother Stacy. As he made his way back to the Camry, he saw officers engaging and opening fire. When the smoke cleared and the dust settled, Stretch was dead, Tuff was hit in the shoulder and under arrest, and both he, Q, and Woody were saying the magic words, "I need a lawyer." Police were only able to make a case against Tuff for the 3 murders that he made that night, because when they examined the Camry, there were no prints on it other than Stretch's and Tuff's. And in the vehicle, there were no other firearms other than the ones that Tuff brought with him that night. See, each day when they took the Camry back to the warehouse, it was cleaned from top to bottom. And every weapon that had been used and any clothes that the crew left in it was completely destroyed. Unable to make a case against Q and Woody, Detective Erickson was pissed. He said, "Let me tell you something, Q. You got lucky for now. But you need to know that your 16-year-old friend is not going to keep silent for the next 30 years. And if he does, you better walk the straight and narrow. Because there's no way that you're going to be able to keep Killer Q bottled up for long." He told Woody, "You're a criminal, through and through. I'm going to see you again." Little did anyone know, the Queen Mother had made a phone call of her own. When she talked to her brother Samuel, she made it very clear to him that if her son was ever implicated in any crimes connected to the murders of King and his crew, or Drea and her mother, the secrets she was holding would be revealed too. She called a family meeting with Uncle Samuel, Pops Andy, and Q, and without getting the details, she quickly surmised Q's level of involvement. And Uncle Samuel took responsibility for the entire situation. He said, "Queen, your son is a man now. He did what men do. He protected his family. He owes the family nothing. But if he ever asks me for a favor, he'll owe me one. You want him out of this life? Keep him out of trouble. And you have my word. When Anya comes home, there won't be a person alive who's ever seen that tape."